Yes.
Right, when it says, I mean, it's even literally capitalized, the word group rights. It's not even just in normal English, right? When you say that to a fan, that could mean it's such an open, vague topic, right? Basically,
sure.
my question, I would frame it like, again, I'll contrast it to the CSPPA. A major concern that people who were team owners had. Now, it wasn't the game dev you're battling or the tournament organizer. It's actually the team that the player in the association plays for. A major concern in 2020 with the CSPPA was that they didn't just imply it. They came out and openly claimed this, that they had rights for the players that the teams didn't have, and that the teams needed to negotiate with the CSPPA in some way to like obtain these rights. Now I can tell you, every team org that I was speaking to within Flashpoint, they were like, the one thing I can tell you right now is we absolutely have all of these people's likeness rights, etc. And effectively, if you know the way team orgs currently work and the model, effectively that's your whole model as a team org, is to get the player rights from the player and then use those to sell to a sponsor, all that stuff. So at the moment, my only issue is
decreasingly so, I would say.
Yeah, of course.
Continue.
But the problem goes like this. At the moment, nearly all the big teams we're talking about would lose their money paying these players to play the game. So my problem is this. In an ideal future where we're in a land of milk and honey and the streets are paved with gold and there's all this money and we're just figuring out what's fair, who should have what share. That's great if the players get their likeness rights, of course. That would be ideal, like the NBA. One guy can be sponsored by Adidas, the other guy's sponsored by Nike, the team's sponsored by whoever, right? The problem obviously comes in the short term. I can tell you a lot of these team orgs, if they were in my seat now, would just tell you, aren't you just going to basically bleed me more dry? Like the rights you're trying to battle for, like I won't have anything left at that point in time. Yes, obviously that would be hyperbolic. That's why I'm saying they would say that, not me. But I want to get your take on this because it's not as simple as, a player should have his rights, therefore let's do it tomorrow and, the team org's evil if he wants to keep it. At the moment, it's kind of the main value he has.
Yeah, I'm curious. What would you say? Because you're straw manning for teams here in a sense by saying it's not what I would say, but this is what teams would say. What is your view of that?
I'm telling you exactly what those teams have told me and would say to you if they were sat in my seat right now.
Sure. I'm curious where you stand in that interpretation from teams, though.
Right, my problem is, on a macro sense, like I say, as an ideal, as a principle, I think it's fine that a player wants to secure his own rights. But I would say, I think it's almost like immoral in the current landscape, essentially, to ask someone to pay you to do a job that you act as though makes them money, loses them money, and then you also say, oh, no, I want more, I want to own more within this. Like, I actually think that's immoral. I don't personally take jobs where I wouldn't join Opcomer, for example, and have them pay me an enormous salary knowing they will go broke in 2 years. I wouldn't do that personally, mate. That's why I'm an unusual person. So that's why I didn't put my perspective forward. I want to get your take on this. Yeah, I'm not a player or a team org, so don't worry about me.
Sure. I was curious because again, I'm on my side of this. Like the perspective you put out from team owners is patently inaccurate for how like these rights work and how we're collecting group rights. This is the same exact set of rights that were the foundation for the first PA and first proper union in American sports. So the 1960s, baseball, they did a Topps trading card deal using a group rights program that created the possibility for an actual union to form. They got rid of things like the reserve clause, where a team could hold a player in baseball for their entire career. They had a unilateral right in a player contract to keep them under that team for their entire career, which meant player salaries were dirt, player rights were dirt because you had no bargaining power. So group rights were the basis for that. And that baseball group rights deal that worked with trading cards was the foundation for which every traditional sport PA has used to fund itself and create its ability to collectively bargain properly. So we are doing the exact same thing in the exact same categories. This is a group rights deal. It does not affect the player's individual ability to go and monetize, and it does not affect the team's ability to go out and do the vast majority of deals that they do. It also, our GLA has protections for all these teams' existing agreements. We're not coming in and claiming any rights that a team's already using or has. That is not happening. So anybody who says otherwise is either lying or misinformed, number one. And when we're talking group rights, we're talking, the big categories of traditional sports hitting group rights are things like, and this is what one team will be doing for us and for players in the LCS and hopefully elsewhere. Frankly, they've done amazing work. If you Google, it's like the Google me like vibe, like Google them. Like
just in case people get confused, one team is all one word. It's the name of the investment group that's with it. Just so people don't get confused by the
we'll discuss one team in a minute.
Sure, but the work that they will do is hitting the key categories of group rights. These are places. Group rights are places where effectively all players are of value to make something happen. Trading cards are the simplest example. A trading card of just 5 players, like a set of trading cards that's just 5 players, has no value. Like the whole point of trading cards is you're trying to collect them all like Pokemon or anything else, you know? If you had the 100 original Pokemon and the only ones that were available were like, you know, I don't know, like Starmie and shit, like it wouldn't do any, like no one would want to buy Pokemon cards, there'd be no value. You need the set, you need to have the highs and the lows. That's how it works. Those are the categories that group rights entail. In sports, you see trading cards, fantasy sports, like licensing to like licensed fantasy, like a fantasy sports provider, like collectibles, things like, here's my blank. It's slipping, but they're the spaces again
video games,
where
maybe something like
video
that?
games. That's what I was doing. Yeah, video games is a classic. You play Madden, and on the Madden cover it says NFL PA approved. That is the group license agreement between Madden or between EA and the players. And the way these deals go, when people especially say that teams are going to get bled dry, all parties, including the league, are making incredible money on these deals because the players who have their rights protected through the PA, and both through the group license, but also because that group license funds the PA to collectively bargain and protect their rights. Those rights are negotiated between the PA and EA, and in parallel, EA is negotiating with the league and the teams as a construction of that league to also get the league marks and the team marks. So both sides are doing a deal and making money off of this thing. So the idea that what we're doing is pulling away, you know, their money and we're stripping them dry, we're not doing that. And if you also looked at the categories we just talked about, I don't remember a great trading card program out there in esports anywhere or in the LCS. So the money that I'm taking off the table for somebody is just not the case. We're trying to put something into the ecosystem of value. You know, trading cards, in my opinion, or digital collectibles, or, you know, any of these like possible properties, you know, Funko toys or whatever else the case may be, that could provide a lot of interest to our fans and really build fandom. You know, trading cards are a big part of sports fandom, right?
Yeah, but my question would be though, is because Funko Pops was in my mind, because I agree, trading cards, yeah, you absolutely want as many people as possible to give it value. You know, like you say, 5-10 cards in a set is fucking worthless, right? I mean, because like everybody gets to complete the set. There's no trading aspect to it. No one has better or worse cards. You know, top trumps, that sort of shit. The more the merrier. I get that. But let's say, for example, is there not a realm of possibility where an organization negotiates a deal for everybody on their rosters, not just league, but, you know, across the board? They're all going to get a Funko Pop made. And then meanwhile, the Players Association has sort of maybe reached out to Funko and said, listen, we can do a deal and all the players on our books, and then you'll all have the little bobbleheads for everybody in the League of Legends group. And then as a result, Funko break off talks with that organization and come to the deal that has more value and more product, which would be the Players Association. Now, I know that's like an insane sort of like rhetorical question and probably a crazy example, but is that not possible? Yeah,
is that not possible? Yeah, I mean, I think you described the solution in your question though, which is that the sum is greater than the parts in value,
but not to the individual org though, surely.
Oh, I mean, this I will not mince words. This is a change in dynamics. Everyone will have to learn the differences in dynamics when a group rights agreement's in place. Teams in traditional sports, when their group rights agreements were in place, learned and had to adjust to the equilibrium over time as well. That'll be the case here. I don't question that at all. Like yes, something is changing. Like that's, you know, that it, like headline, like thing happens and everyone has to adapt. Like that's a reality to this and the program that we're building. But at the same time, I do believe fully that like the value that Funko Pops can create from doing all of the players and all the teams and having all the rights secured, and also run through the process that Funko Pops is used to when they're working with one team already on deals, most likely in the NFL or the MLB or anywhere else. They're used to working with a players association has the rights and a league who has the rights. Those deals are going to be able to do better scale for everybody involved, in my opinion. And, you know, I don't have data sheets in front of you. I can't prove it, but I took economics in college. I was a business major. I think fundamentally, like these things ring true. And again, the categories that we're working within and prioritizing, especially, are places that have not historically been utilized effectively or at all. And we know one team is the best partner in the world at monetizing this for everybody involved. So, you know, I was at the Riot owners meeting yesterday. met with owners directly face to face to talk to them about this, and that we were going to announce this, and this was something we were going to work towards, and have an honest conversation, because I have a lot of respect for those people. I've been in the room with them. I've been on their side of the table for many years, and I understand that like there's a process to figuring out how we make this relationship work, and that I genuinely believe, like, I would, you could put me on a lie detector, even though I'm not really sure those things work based on watching TV and movies, and say that like we're going to do good for them and we're going to create value. Again, if you look at the work one team has just done with Fanatics in the last year to explode the trading card market and create new value for the leagues and players, like this is a true like opportunity for esports to find more sustainability, not just through collective bargaining, but through actual revenue that we can help bring to the table and be a real partner and not just be a drag on the system for some reason.
I have a question for you, Phil, because I'm not sure how this works. Don't the teams get some money off of these agreements for video games or trading cards because they use team IPs?
Yep.
Like
so
on the jerseys?
that's the dual license part of this. So like I described, there's a parallel negotiation going on at the same time for any of these deals where the league and the PA are both working in concert to some extent to figure out, okay, like, we want to do our deal with this. In traditional sports, typically the PA signs first and signals the party that's going to go. But those deals are baked in with revenue, with space for the league to also get a share of revenue. There's understanding of kind of who gets what in splits. It's not something I'm an expert on. I'm going to be perfectly honest about that. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of very smart people who have a lot more experience in this than me to understand the dynamics. But that's a collaborative relationship that works because both sides are trying to get to the party and succeed. So that is how that works. The league absolutely gets a lot of money out of Madden, gets a lot of money out of trading cards. These are mutually beneficial relationships. Both sides are getting deals. It's not like we're taking all the deal and no one else is getting something. We're making sure that the players are getting their share. I mean, I saw it in contracts this offseason, players' contracts suddenly having a clause in there that said, we have 100%, we own all of your individual and group rights to NFTs in perpetuity, and we have 100% of the revenue goes to us. Everybody knows, like, NFTs or anything else, cash grabs, whatever you may have or feelings about them, there's a lot of money to be made there, and the fact that a contract can, in good conscience, state that we're going to take 100% of the revenue from this is unconscionable to me. I couldn't believe it when I saw them, and that's where like we have to do our job to make sure that players are protected and having the same rights afforded to them that you see in traditional sports. And a part of that is protecting their group license and protecting the group rights for them, and a part of that is using the funds from that go to fund the PA to make sure that we're doing good advocacy work.
But I mean,
moving towards unionizing.
To what Thorin was alluding to earlier about the teams probably being nervous about this and putting these clauses in so that people actually understand the team economics right now, because it's really, I think, important to get that in order to understand why the teams might be reluctant to have these kind of agreements in place, even though, as I'm sure we'll discuss later, and as you alluded to with the Major League Baseball trading card deal, it did in fact lead to an actual union later on down the road. And in this case, that might actually be beneficial to the owners because it could create a salary cap, which is something that owners probably want. We'll talk about that later. But for the moment, the owners are probably relatively, I would guess, kind of wary or adversarial to this occurring, because the problem with esports, guys, and in terms of monetization, is because the way that traditional sports teams monetize. So in traditional sports, the teams actually own the leagues. So they are able to have perfect transparency into all of the income streams coming in. They're also able to do things like sell media rights, which is not possible because Twitch has a monopoly and literally refuses to pay for esports media rights because they got burned on things like the Overwatch League deal, like big time burned, like $100 million burned. So they're not going to do that anymore. And until there's a reasonable competitor to Twitch out there, those media rights are not going to exist. And that's the primary income stream of traditional sports. Now, the other thing that's happening...
So they actually did get burned. They sort of handed Bobby Kotick a gold-plated flamethrower and then said, just do whatever you're going to do with it. And they went, oh, please burn the place down. Oh, please never do that again to anyone not my friends.
This is true. Yes, this is true. But the other thing is that now we have alternate, income streams within esports. So, for example, esports is a marketing engine for the game of League of Legends. Like that's what LCS is. Now, if I'm the NFL, if more people play football, well, certainly more people might watch football if they're invested in the sport. I might get a better pipeline of future players, but I'm not making money necessarily from every football that's sold. Now, some of them have like the NFL logo on it, so they're probably making some money, but it's not the same as Bjergsen uses a skin on stream in the LCS. People go buy said skin, and the problem is that there is no transparency with the team owners about how much money, like how many people are buying a Zillion skin after Bjergsen plays that Zillion skin. Do the owners get any of that revenue? No, they don't. They don't even know what that revenue is. They don't know how effective the marketing is. Riot has data that says this user who watches the stream on lolesports.com, who is logged in, spends X number of dollars per year compared to the average user. Like they have ways of quantifying the money that is being generated through marketing that is not shared, and the information nor the money is shared with these partner teams. So the teams themselves are the ones left holding the bag, and the teams are in a very bad place in comparison to developers, tournament operators, and players. They are in the worst spot currently because their income streams are so severely restricted. And so why they may be not super thrilled with this is because it feels like
because they're being squeezed from both sides is their vibe.
Yes.
That's what they feel like.
Yes, exactly. And, we can argue whether or not that's true, but I think it's a fair assessment of a team's perspective in the current landscape. And I think in the long run, if this goes into full unionization, if this goes into salary cap, it could be a good thing for the teams and frankly for the players as well, which we'll discuss later. But like, does that make sense in terms of, you've been on the team side. Is that a fair assessment of what's going on within this space?
Yeah, I think when we had conversations internally about talking to teams and understanding how this would work and how it would work with teams, like, Marty and I were both team owners, Marty being my contemporary at one team who was sort of our primary on the deal from their side. He was the co-founder of Splice and Mad Lions and worked there for a long time. And like, we're both keenly aware of the economics for team owners, and we understand that, like, when you walk into a room and you tell them we're going to do a group rights program, the first initial, response is going to be a threat response for sure. Absolutely. It's going to be, whoa, is this going to affect my bottom line? I, again, have laid out the case for why we don't think that's the case and why we believe we're actually going to generate value that's additive to the pool here. And we also do believe, through we cannot survive. Like, if you take one thing away from this session or someone who's watching or listening, the PA cannot exist without group rights. It's the only viable path that's been shown in the history of North American sports to fund a successful players association. It's just a fact. Show me players associations that are successful and operating and unionizing that aren't using a group rights model, and I'll give you $100 bill. I got someone in it. I'll find somewhere. There's got to be cash somewhere in the world. But
and the reason, by the way, why this is important, Phil, sorry to interrupt, but to talk about why the monetization of the group rights is important is because the vast majority of sponsorships go to just a few star athletes, which makes it very difficult for these organizations to be paid for, or indeed for these organizations to have the money to fight legal battles for the rights of kind of the average player, which, as we just saw in America, the Major League Baseball negotiations, which helped to increase the floor of how much like the lowest paid players are paid.
Yep,
and that's also what the players associations do. And part of their funding goes to helping these players and paying these players who may not have massive, Nike deals, right?
Yeah. For sure. It's a humbling thing to see in traditional sports that players like LeBron James and Tom Brady, they don't just join their group license agreement. They're also the first person signed on, with their name on the masthead that says, like, we stand with the rest, because they're in the trenches with the rest of the players, and they might be a superstar, but they know that their left tackle or that backup, like the long snapper is someone who's equally important to the success of the team at some level. Like, you need all those people to make a team, and they join because they understand that, they may have a lot of individual bargaining power, but you can't do it without everybody, and you need to you need to do your part to raise the sales. So that's a big part of our job, is to make sure that all of our players are bought in as well. And it's a huge part. I think historically in traditional sports, you can count on one hand the number of players who have ever opted out of a GLA or threatened to. I think Michael Jordan talked about it in the 90s for a couple of years, but didn't do it. And the only other one I really think of that actually happened was Barry Bonds in the early 2000s. If you played an MLB game for a couple of years there, it was just like Giants. I probably get Barry Bonds' number, but forgive me. But it was just his number. It didn't have Barry Bonds in there because he wasn't a part of the group license.
I think it did happen once with the NBA though. I'm pretty sure there was like a game or something. It didn't have one of the stars. I can't remember. Might even NBA Jam or something. I can't remember. There was one. I think there was.
It's incredibly narrow list historically, and it's something where everybody understands the importance of participating because that collective power, as within any space, when you collectivize, when you put your rights together, both in collective bargaining or in group rights or anything else, you're creating more value, more ability to bargain, and that raises the sales for people. I mean, again, when baseball unionized, not only did they get rid of the reserve clause, but players who are on the bottom went from making it was they had esports style contracts in the old days. You got a house to live in with 10 other guys, and you got like enough money for food on the weekends. That was like, and you had to work in the summers. Like that was how it was if you were playing baseball and you were like a bottom player for 50, 60 years prior to that. So these things, do raise the bar for the player at the bottom. That's always how unionization and collective bargaining or in any sort of collective work happens. Like the people who have or most vulnerable get the most protection and the most support out of this. And it's a huge and humbling experience to have people who have a lot of individual power say, I'm going to put my name on this. I'm going to support this and be a part of this thing. So it's big.
I would even say, by the way, I actually think in esports, it won't be an easier sell to the player because players can somehow never conceive that they'll be worse than they are today. But when you consider what a short lifespan you have in terms of your career in esports, I think it's even more worth it for the superstar player because in League of Legends, in a year, you could be half as good. In 2 years, you could barely be in the league. So you might actually be that bottom feeder player who's the one who needs the help from the superstar in 3 years. We don't have like the 20, 30-year careers you have in the big sports where you can sort of know, as long as I don't get injured, maybe I'll be this good, So I think actually in esports, you should even be more incentivized as a player to want to participate in group negotiation.
I mean, even in traditional sports, like I read in the new baseball deal that the average, play time in the major leagues for a player is only 4 years. So there, it's shorter than you would think. Even in baseball, you have to have pretty good longevity even to play baseball for 20 years. It seems like
that probably is a stat that's skewed though. That sounds like that fucking stat where they say everyone used to die before age 30, but they didn't. What happened was a bazillion people died at age like 8 months or whatever, and then things. I'm imagining that's the guy who gets cut after the 10-day contract. This way,
I think I read something as well, like about NFL playing careers being like unbelievably short. Like the average was something like 4.6, years in total or something. Like it is crazy how short these things can be. With that being said, I did want to ask Phil just a sort of quick question again, and that is down the road, do you envision any issues with these image rights deals that are, because we've had about 20 years of esports now, and I would say like the last 10, basically it's a shit show in terms of like the contracts that have been signed by players. The contracts that always come across my desk are you essentially sign away your image rights for any purpose in perpetuity. And in certain ones in North America now, this phrase comes in, which always cracks me up. They use anywhere in the known universe, I believe is the phraseology, which, just in case we like...
Colonization is closer than we see.
Just in case we encounter fucking interdimensional beings that have an interest in esports or whatever. But so my question is, do you envision any issues? Because obviously... I feel that in any collective bargaining agreement, the value is obviously in the exclusivity, that we can exclusively give you access to these image rights to use in your product. And then maybe a player retires, and 2 years down the road, an org who still has the image rights in perpetuity to a famous player, maybe they go and do something with it. And would that in any way devalue the project you're working on or cause any problems, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, every group rights deal kind of comes out of a place where they're butting up against an existing contractual situation where the rights are broadly held by another entity almost always. And the way that a group rights deal works and the way that ours will work is it has a clause in there that protects all existing contracts. And also, if when you sign on to the deal, a big part of you're signing on to is you're basically saying in that deal, you're saying, in the future, like when I'm able to, I'm going to be giving these specific rights to the group. I will not sign future deals that provide these rights elsewhere. So, especially look at the LCS where contracts, we have 4-year contracts are available in very limited situations right now. But by and large, everyone's on a 3-year contract or less. And the way that a group rights deal will work in traditional sports, or as here, is that as time goes on, as players, if we get all of our players to sign on to the GLA, then as time goes on, there will be a ticking clock that will say that, at the very least in 3 years, players will now have committed their rights to the GLA and they won't be available for them to sign into contracts. That's how this works in traditional sports. It's, and the ticking clock is very much a real thing that you've seen. Baseball, again, there's some really great books on one called Power Shift that was written. That's, I think, a really great breakdown on how baseball rights have developed and really explain, if we're going to be doing this in the future, everyone will be able to know and signal for people that's where the rights will be available at a future date if players commit to it. Everyone has, every player has a right to do that. They're not signing away any current rights or anything that they're giving to a team today, but they would be committing to being a part of this program in the future if they're not available today. That's how the kind of mechanics of something like this works. And yeah, like it is something that is putting a flag in the ground as people, as a group, and saying, like, we're going to assert this collective right together. That can be very scary. It was very scary for me. Like, again, it's hard to walk up in front of a bunch of owners and talk to them and say, hey, we're going to do this thing that establishes these rights for players. And, I would like to work with you immediately because we can bring real value to you right away. But also, like, the way this is going to work is, if we do our job successfully and our players believe in what we're doing and participate, like, we will have these rights in time, as has happened in every traditional sport, in order to make them capable of existing from a players association standpoint. So, it's a hard conversation, but honesty is the best policy, they say most of the time. So, do your best.
Funny you come from Evil Geniuses, because actually someone who was a key figure in Evil Geniuses over, I'd say about 15 years ago now, actually once told me that a player he had just signed, in doing so, he owned this player's likeness rights in perpetuity and retroactively, and that I had to send him all the POV demos I had from this player in his former team. And that, yeah, exactly. Don't worry though, even back then, I understood to just tell this guy to go fuck himself, whether that was the law or not. I didn't actually technically know whether legally that was possible. But no, what I want to go now, go on.
Yeah, I was saying you can write anything on paper you want, but there's if it's unconscionable, a judge can still throw it out. So there's
no. He was definitely, like I said, it was a long time ago. He was relying on the idea I'd just go like, shit, better do what he says, and it was never ever going to be contested in court. Of course, want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.